Hello! Let's walk through the course curriculum so you have an idea of what to expect in this course. Now, some of these topics may seem intimidating at first, but they are all connected and they are all key components that make you a top-level developer. We're going to go step by step, working on real-life problems, writing code, practicing, so that we can feel confident with each one of these topics. Now, the first part of the course is going to cover SSH. And in this SSH section, we're going to learn about the SSH command, how to access remote computers, how to connect to a server that is in another part of the world. We're going to learn about encryption, about symmetrical and asymmetrical encryption, as well as hashing. And we're also going to learn about SSH keys, about generating SSH keys, what public and private keys are, and how to manage them on the server. We're going to have some fun exercises where your app was just deleted off of a server in the middle of the night, and you have to move all your project files back onto the server using SSH. And we're also going to set up GitHub with SSH. After a nice short section to start us off, we're then going to dive into a big topic of performance optimization. And this is so big that I've divided this into 3 parts. The first part will be network optimizations. We're going to talk about how we can minimize our files and improve delivery of our application. And then we're going to learn about front-end optimizations, about the critical render path, how to improve it so our website can load fast. We're going to learn about progressive web apps and about optimizing code. And we're going to help Keiko Corp actually improve their company website as well as their RoboFriends app. We're going to make a progressive web app that works offline and can even be submitted to the App Store using just JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. But we're also going to learn about interesting topics like code splitting and making React and Redux applications fast through smart rendering. We'll then finish our complete understanding of performance optimizations by working on the back-end optimizations, talking about content delivery networks, scaling databases, a Postgres database, and an API server all into one so that they all run from one command. By the end of it, we're going to feel very comfortable with Docker whenever we deploy our applications. We then start learning about a new database. Redis is one of the most popular and often used databases that is a key value storage. We'll first dive into the topic of databases and the type of databases that we have. From there, we'll spin up our own Redis server, learn how to use Redis, how to use the Redis CLI, so that we're able to use Redis now for caching to make our websites faster, as well as for session management, something that we'll cover in the next topic. Using our SmartBrain app, we're going to create an entire dynamic part of the website, that is user management. We're going to start off by creating a new profile page. And using this profile page, we're going to learn about session-based authentication, where cookies would be used, and also about token authentication, such as using JWT tokens. We're going to learn about each one of those, what the pros and cons are of each, and then we're actually going to implement a secure authentication flow that you can implement in any app that you choose. We're going to use Redis for session management so that we have protected routes, and this way, anytime we have a sign-in functionality or we have members, in the next video, your first day of work is finally going to start at Keiko Corp. Enjoy the projects, enjoy the exercises. We're going to be building a lot of fun things. Have fun and enjoy the ride. Good morning. This is you. You're starting a new job today. You're excited but nervous. This is a big shot company in Silicon Valley. Its name is Keiko Corp. It's the biggest company that everyone is talking about, and it has two big products that has made it famous. One is a RoboFriends app. Everyone is collecting these robots, and it's hotter than Pokemon Go. The other is a face detection SmartBrain app that is going to revolutionize the whole industry. This is a big opportunity for you. Let's get to work. You get into work. You meet the team and the boss. His name is Bruno, by the way. He always has perfect hair. I don't know how he does it. Anyway, after a few minutes, he pulls you to the side and tells you their senior developer just left the company today. I hope you can fill the big void that she's leaving behind. No pressure, Bruno says. But wait, you're terrified. You're not a senior developer. Anxiety rushes over you. He wants a lot of things done. A little bit later, you find out that the senior developer just left to go work for Google. Great. Those are going to be some big shoes to fill. But back to Bruno.